The moment Marcel Vance opened his apartment door that bright Saturday afternoon, he saw Fear standing barefoot in the hallway, wearing a soaked gray sweatshirt, trembling hands, and eyes that looked like they had already cried through a lifetime. His roommate, Sienna Vale, the woman who usually moved through the apartment like nothing in the world could touch her, was gripping the edge of the doorframe as if it was the only thing keeping her upright. Behind her, sunlight poured into the hallway, warm and ordinary, but her face told him something terrible had followed her home. Before Marcel could even ask what happened, Sienna leaned closer, her voice breaking so badly it barely sounded like her, and whispered, "Pretend you're my boyfriend. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the kind of love that begins when someone chooses to protect another person without asking for anything in return, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Ancient Truth." Stories like this remind us that sometimes one small act of compassion can change two broken lives forever. Marcel had not expected his day to become anything more than laundry, leftover coffee, and trying to finish a project he had been avoiding all week. He and Sienna were roommates only because rent in the city had become impossible and because a mutual friend had insisted they were both responsible enough not to ruin each other's lives. For 6 months, they had shared the same apartment like polite strangers. She worked at a design studio, came home late, kept her side of the living room spotless, and never spoke much about her past. Marcel worked remotely as a software consultant, lived mostly in old t-shirts, and had learned not to ask questions when Sienna came home with red eyes and said she was just tired. They were friendly, but not close. They knew each other's coffee preferences, laundry days, and emergency contacts, but not the private wounds they carried. That afternoon, the apartment was filled with golden daylight. The living room looked peaceful, almost too peaceful for what was about to happen. A lamp glowed softly near the couch even though it was daytime, the curtains were half open, and the faint smell of rain still clung to the air from a morning shower. Marcel had been standing near the kitchen when he heard a sharp knock at his bedroom door, not the usual polite tap Sienna used when asking about bills or packages, but a desperate, uneven knock that made him move before he thought. When he opened it, he found her standing there in an oversized gray top slipping from one shoulder, hair messy, skin damp, and face pale with terror. Her eyes kept darting past him toward the front entrance, where the lock had barely clicked shut. At first, Marcel thought she was hurt. There was sweat on her neck, her breathing was too fast, and her fingers were shaking around the doorframe. But then he saw the fear in her eyes change into calculation, not cold calculation, but survival. She stepped halfway into his room, looked at him as if asking forgiveness before even speaking, and said the words that would drag both of them into the truth she had been hiding. "Pretend you're my boyfriend." The sentence hit him like a slap. For one stunned second, he thought he had misunderstood. Then a heavy knock came from the apartment door behind her, slow and confident, the kind of knock made by someone who believed they had a right to enter. Sienna flinched so hard Marcel's confusion disappeared. He moved toward the hallway, but she grabbed his wrist. Her hand was ice cold. She told him not to open it yet, not until she explained enough. Her ex-fiancé, Callum Pierce, had found her. She had changed her number, changed jobs, moved apartments, and told almost no one where she lived, but somehow he had appeared outside the building that morning. At first, he looked polished and harmless, holding flowers in one hand and apologies in the other. He had waited near the entrance and smiled when she returned from the store, acting like he had only come to talk. But when she tried to walk past him, his voice changed. He told her she belonged with him. He told her she had embarrassed him by leaving. He told her he had seen her with another man in a photo from a friend's party and wanted to know if she had replaced him. The circle photo on Sienna's phone later explained everything. Weeks earlier, she had gone to a small public event with coworkers. A man had been speaking to her too closely, and she had looked uncomfortable. Someone snapped a photo from behind, making it look like an intimate conversation. Callum had seen it online, twisted it into betrayal, and convinced himself that Sienna had left him for someone else. Now he was at the door, and in her panic, the only lie she could think of was the one that might finally make him back away. She needed Marcell to become the man Callum thought existed. Marcell did not know how to pretend love, but he knew how to recognize fear. He gently moved Sienna behind him, lowered his voice, and told her to breathe. He opened the front door only halfway, keeping his body between Callum and the apartment. Outside stood a man in a crisp dark shirt, handsome in a controlled, polished way, with eyes that did not match his smile. Callum looked at Marcell, then passed him toward Sienna, and the warmth vanished from his face. He asked who Marcell was. Marcell felt Sienna's fingers brush the back of his arm, still trembling, and something protective rose inside him so strongly it surprised him. He said he was her boyfriend, and that Sienna did not want to speak to him. For a moment, the hallway went silent. Sunlight from the stairwell window fell across Callum's face, making the scene feel even more unreal. This was not midnight, not a stormy street, not the kind of darkness where danger is expected. It was daytime, ordinary and bright, which made the terror worse. Callum smiled slowly, but it was not a smile of kindness. He asked Sienna if this was true. She stepped beside Marcell, close enough that her shoulder touched his arm, and nodded. Her face was still wet with fear, but her voice steadied just enough when she said she had moved on. Callum laughed softly and reminded her of all the years he had taken care of her. That was when Marcell understood. This was not a heartbroken man asking for closure. This was a man angry that someone he once controlled had learned how to leave. Sienna's eyes filled with tears, but she did not step back. Marcell told him again to leave. Callum's jaw tightened. He glanced inside the apartment, at the couch, the lamp, the signs of a life he had not been invited into. Then he leaned closer and quietly warned Marcell that he did not know Sienna the way he did. Marcell answered that maybe that was the problem. The words changed something. Callum's confidence cracked. A neighbor's door opened down the hall, and an older woman looked out, sensing the tension. Callum noticed her, straightened his shirt, and put his mask back on. He told Sienna this was not over, then walked away slowly, as if leaving had been his choice all along. Marcell kept the door open until the elevator closed. Only then did Sienna collapse against the wall, covering her mouth to stop a sob from breaking out. Marcell did not touch her without permission. He only stood nearby and told her she was safe for now. What followed was not romantic at first. It was messy, painful, and human. Sienna sat on the couch with a blanket around her shoulders while Marcell made tea she barely drank. She told him pieces of the story in broken fragments. Callum had not always been cruel. In the beginning, he had seemed attentive, protective, almost perfect. Then protection became permission. He wanted to know where she was, who she spoke to, why she wore certain clothes, why she laughed too much around other people. When she tried to leave, he apologized beautifully. When she stayed, he punished her quietly. The final break came when he embarrassed her in front of friends, then blamed her for making him jealous. She left with 2 bags, a cracked phone, and no belief that anyone would understand. Marcell listened without interrupting. He had his own reasons for understanding silence. Years earlier, his younger sister had stayed too long with someone who made her feel small. Marcell had missed the signs then, too busy with work, too willing to believe her when she said everything was fine. By the time she finally left, she was a shadow of herself. Since then, Marcell had carried a quiet guilt that lived under his ribs. Sitting beside Sienna, he felt that old guilt turn into purpose. He could not change what he had missed before, but he could choose not to miss what was happening now. Over the next few days, the pretend relationship became a shield, but it also became a mirror. Marcell helped Sienna file a report. He walked with her to the building office and requested security footage. He helped her change passwords, document messages, and tell 2 trusted friends what had happened. He did not act like a hero. He did not take over her life. he simply stood beside her until her own strength began to return. And Sienna, who had spent years being told she was dramatic, difficult, and ungrateful, slowly began to believe that her fear had been real and her freedom mattered. The strange part was how natural the pretending became in public. When Callum sent flowers, Marcell was there when Sienna threw them away. When Callum waited across the street from her office, Marcell arrived with coffee and stood beside her until security came. When friends asked if they were dating, they exchanged awkward looks and avoided answering too quickly. Somewhere between fear and safety, between fake smiles and real concern, something quiet began to grow. It was not sudden passion. It was trust. It was the way Sienna started leaving her bedroom door open again. It was the way Marcell learned when she needed space and when she needed someone to sit silently nearby. It was the way she began to laugh again, softly at first, then fully, like sunlight returning to a room. But healing is never a straight road. One afternoon, Callum came back, this time not to the apartment but to the small park near their building where Sienna had gone to clear her head. Marcell was not with her. Callum cornered her near a bench, speaking calmly enough that strangers did not notice, but close enough that she could smell his cologne and feel the old panic rise. He told her Marcell would get tired of protecting her. He told her no one stayed with someone as damaged as her. For a moment, the old Sienna almost believed him. Then she saw Marcell across the street, not running in like a savior, but calling the police exactly as they had planned. Sienna lifted her chin, stepped back, and told Callum she was not afraid of being alone anymore, because being alone had never hurt her the way he had. That was the real turning point. Callum was removed, the report became stronger, and the building finally banned him from the property. But more importantly, Sienna stopped living as if danger owned every room she entered. She began reclaiming small things. She wore the red dress she had hidden in the back of her closet. She went back to the design studio without checking every reflection. She called her mother and told the truth. And one evening, as the sun set gold across the living room, she thanked Marcell for pretending when she needed him to. Marcell looked at her for a long moment and admitted that somewhere along the way, pretending had become the only dishonest part, because his care for her had become real. Sienna did not answer immediately. She looked toward the door where she had once stood terrified, then back at the man who had opened it without knowing his life was about to change. She told him she was still healing. She told him she did not want love born from rescue. Marcell nodded and said he did not want to be her rescuer. He wanted to be someone she could choose freely, on a good day, in daylight, without fear chasing her. That was when Sienna cried again, but this time the tears were not from terror. They were from being understood. Months later, the apartment looked the same to anyone else. Same couch, same lamp, same hallway, same door. But to Sienna, it had become the place where her life began again. She and Marcell moved slowly, carefully, honestly. They went for walks in the daytime. They cooked terrible dinners and laughed about them. They learned each other's histories without trying to fix every broken piece. And when people asked how they got together, Sienna would smile and say it started with the worst day of her life, when she knocked on a door terrified and asked a quiet man to pretend he loved her. Near the end of this story, if Sienna and Marcell's journey touched your heart, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to Ancient Truth for more emotional stories about kindness, courage, and second chances. Special request: comment kindness can save a life if you believe one good person can help someone find the strength to begin again. In the end, Marcell did not save Sienna by becoming her fake boyfriend. He helped her remember she was already worth protecting. And Sienna did not fall in love because she was afraid. She fell in love slowly, in the safety of ordinary afternoons, with a man who never tried to own her heart, only gave it a place to rest.